We finally, Kat and I finally finished the first season of part 3. God, it took a while. It took a minute, it took us so much less time to finish part 2, because part 2 is like what? 16 episodes or something like that? Like it's actually, wait, is it? Hang on, I gotta do some, remember how doing math is embarrassing for me? It's like a 24 episode season. Part 1 it's a 15 episode season. Okay. Yeah. 15 episodes in part 2. 24. Almost 10 more in the first season of part 3. Yeah, they eventually figured out not to structure them like this. Because part 3 does feel a little bit long. It feels a little long. It feels longer in the anime than later parts, which are actually longer in the manga. Yeah, so I guess I would like to talk a little bit on my thoughts, but I guess it's been interesting to watch her reactions to things. Not what I necessarily expected. So, I was following what was it? I was over at her house like last week or something, and we were watching it, and I was getting just a little sleepy, and I was like, I might just close my eyes and take a short little nap. I was kind of debating it, and then I saw that the next episode up was the sun, and I was like, oh, I'll fall asleep for the sun, dude. I will, I'll conk out. And then when I woke up almost exactly 20 minutes later when the episode was over. And I'm like, how was it? Do you like the sun? And she goes, dude, that episode was awesome. I'm like, what? She goes, dude, that scene with the camel was so funny. It's like, okay, all right, sure. Let's go. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And then she really liked Death 13. She liked that one. These are like the last couple arcs of that season, so those are the ones that are freshest in my mind. She liked Death 13. She thought it had the coolest design so far, which I agree. I think Death 13 has a cool look. Let me and then she didn't care that much for Judgment, which I was surprised at, or High Priestess. I like both those. I like Judgment a lot. I think Judgment is a great arc. I am like really Polnareff is like one of my favorite characters. Let me pull up I want to pull up the actual episode list while I'm talking. Polnareff is like one of my favorite characters. I think it's weird. I wish that the other Crusaders who weren't Jotaro, or I wish just like Kakyoin or Avdol got as much development time as Polnareff does, because he has like a nice solid arc. He has a nice solid arc where he goes through this whole, he gets this introduction, and there's like this big dramatic event that happens when Avdol dies, and he feels super guilty for it. And then the Judgment arc, you get this scene where like his wish gets fulfilled to like bring him and his sister Avdol and his sister back from the dead, but they're like zombies and they start eating him, and he is literally being eaten alive by his own guilt. And it's great. And like by the end of it, when Avdol comes back, which I don't like that. I really don't like Avdol coming back. But like when it's done, it's like Polnareff has gone through something. He's gone through like a whole arc, and he's still, but this is what I like about Araki's writing. Polnareff he's still the same guy. He's still the same guy that you met the first time he shows up. He's like this goofy, woman-loving French guy who has like a bit of a serious side to him when he has to be. He's got this kind of this inner seriousness, and like sense of vengeance and things. But just, he can kind of switch between them when the situation needs him to. But by the end, but he's still that guy, but he's grown up a little bit. He feels like he's changed. He's a little bit of a different guy. He's been through some experiences and he's come out a little more mature. And that's all I need from a character arc, right? And unfortunately, like, other characters just don't really get that. Jotaro is a very functional protagonist, right? He shows up, he does his thing, he's Jotaro. Joseph, we've already had like a whole thing, right? We already had a whole story devoted to making him a lovable guy. And then Avdol and Kakyoin are just meh. They're just meh. I don't care that much for them. There's like a couple, I guess there's like the Kakyoin cherry thing. That's like one memorable moment that he has. Never really gets brought up again. Yeah, I'm just looking at the episode list. Strength. Okay, here's the thing. I didn't realize it. I think I had some thoughts about part 3 that I needed to like revise. I think rewatching this has actually been kind of nice because it's especially with the rest of the series in mind, looking back at this, part 3. Okay. It's really interesting to see how it compares to the other parts. Many people say that like, oh, the other parts fit into, they're kind of like references to other there's certain types of stories, right? Part 1 is like a vampire story. Some people call it like a horror thing sometimes, maybe, I guess. Part 2 is like Indiana Jones. People say part 3 is like Around the World in 80 Days. Part 4 is like a little, part 4 is like a slice of life anime crossed with Twin Peaks. Part 5 is a gangster story. Part 6 is a prison break. Part 7 is a western. Part 8 is Twin Peaks again, but somehow weirder. And so on, right? Yeah, you could definitely say there's the obvious illusion. They make the reference to Around the World in 80 Days in part 3. But really, what I've realized is part 3 is the most horror part. It is easily the most horror-inspired part of the series. Mind you, stands were modeled, the word for stand in Japanese, or like the kanji that it's sometimes written with, is like, it's called ghostly ripple. It's like a ghost, it's supposed to have some kind of like spirit, supernatural form. And mind you, this is coming right off of parts 1 and 2, which had strong horror influences that were pretty obvious, especially in part 1, right? But part 3 especially, like, there is a real point that the show is trying to make to establish atmosphere. And I look at strength, and everyone thinks of the strength fight as just being like, cringy, the cringy orangutan. But man, I totally forgot that whole segment where they get to the boat. There's this big ship. This big like cruise ship. It's not like a cruise ship. It's like I don't know what kind of ship it's supposed to be. It's like a big ship, right? And everyone's getting on and they're just checking it out. And the shots of just the empty hallways and the music, and like when the crane just out of nowhere swings over and decapitates that guy, it's freaky and it feels like something out of a horror movie. The atmosphere, like the tension that's built up of like, dude, like fucking, like when they find that orangutan in that cage, it's like, what? Like, it's a really memorable scene. It is like a really memorable visual because it's such a creepy thing to just have. Orangutans specifically, because they're obviously, apes are kind of close to humans. They're like one of the closest animals to humans. But orangutans especially are noteworthy for being like really intelligent and resourceful and actually like good at using tools. Like, orangutans, like, they can go spearfishing. Like, they are shockingly, almost scarily resourceful and intelligent. And so having this thing that, like, it could, like, what is it thinking about? Why is it, it's just this weird vibe coming off of this animal. It's like really compelling. Like, you really want to know what's going on. And then, of course, there's the scene where it really feels like he's getting a little too handsy with this little girl in the shower. And it's like, okay, Araki. I feel like Araki writes stuff like that. There's something like that in, like, every part. Not like the sexual assault kind of way, but just something where I'm picturing, like, a lot of people would say that it's maybe in bad taste. And all I can picture is Araki at his desk going, dude, this is fucking crazy. Dude, I can't believe what I'm seeing right now. That's what I picture him doing all the time when he's writing scenes like that. Dude, like, what am I on right now? Yeah, and if you think about it, I really got this with, strength and then justice. The justice arc. Like, that is like a whole horror movie. And it makes a lot of sense because it kind of becomes the formula for stand battles. If I was to describe a stand battle, like the basic structure of most stand fights in the series, it's the protagonist or protagonists go somewhere, something strange starts happening, something bizarre, and then they have to figure out that there is an enemy who is trying to attack them or mess with them in some way, and then try to figure out who they are or how the ability works, and then come up with a way to counteract it and use their own abilities to fight them. So, like, most stand fights, that's like the notable thing about JoJo, is that the fights are rarely just like punch outs. There's a couple of those, but the fights are usually much more cerebral, and they're a lot more chess-like, where the characters they're finding clues and they're figuring out what the enemy is doing. And then usually once the opponent is actually confronted, it's typically a short fight, right? Like, that's the entire way that Jotaro works. Like, how he functions in a fight is, if anything is within a certain, like, 3-meter range of me, I can just fucking kill them in 1 second. The challenge is him actually getting within the range and figuring out who he even has to attack. And if you think about it, that's a lot. That's like how a lot of horror movies work. That's how a lot of horror movies work, Characters go somewhere, everything's hunky-dory, and then someone dies. There's some kind of supernatural thing that starts going on. What do we have to do? We have to figure out how it works and what the monster is, and then we have to figure out if it has a weakness and where we can find it and try to fight it. And that's how there's a lot of horror stories that work like that. You think about, like, The Thing or something. The Thing's a great example, actually. Is there anything that... I guess Yellow Temperance is a little bit like The Thing. Also, detective stories. Araki is a big fan of mysteries. In the Justice fight, there is literally Jotaro references... the little trick that he uses to trip Enyaba up is literally a thing that he references to Columbo. He says, I learned this on Columbo, how he writes his name, he writes the wrong name down in the guest book, and then he's like, how did you know my name was Jotaro? And that's how he catches her in the lie. Like, that's a very Columbo trick, right? And it's funny because I almost feel like Araki almost stumbled into this. I wonder if, like, you can tell in the early days of part 3 that he is not super sure where he wants to take the stands. And, like, he has a general, like, you can see, like, oh, he's got the rough idea. And you can see the potential of it. But he hasn't really hammered out all the details yet. There's a lot of stuff that just isn't quite figured out. Like, I think of a little detail, like it's actually just sort of a plot hole, retcon, who knows what you want to call it, inconsistency of that first fight with Jotaro and Avdol in the prison. Jotaro uses like he like smashes a toilet or like a pipe, and then uses it to the water from that to put out Avdol's flames. And then later on, Avdol is like, oh, actually my flames can't be put out by water because it's like not really fire. It's like magic, essentially. It's like made of spirit energy. Like, that's just little details that he's figuring out. There's things like talking with stands, using your stand to talk to someone else, which surprisingly never comes up again. I feel like he could have written, excuse me, I feel like he could have written something to use that. Like, you would think that the power to just basically communicate telepathically between two characters would be used fairly frequently. Like I don't know, two villains meet up. Two villain stand users meet up, and they're sitting. Oh, wouldn't that be great? They're sitting right next to each other, or they're sitting like across, like in two separate tables at a restaurant, but they're using their stands to hear each other and communicate. And despite the fact that maybe the main character is watching them, they're like, oh, they're never talking. Like, when are they? How are they communicate? Why are these two people in proximity to each other? It's because they're talking with their stands. He never does anything like that, which I think is a little, I was like, he should have used that. He should use that more. I don't think he ever uses it after like part 3, which is a shame. Like shrinking your stand down, like in the lovers fight, which, I mean, granted, they say that it takes a lot of concentration to be able to do that, but Kat was like, oh my god, are we doing this now? Is this actually what they're gonna do? They're gonna get tiny. And I was like, yeah, do you wanna bet if he ever uses this ever again in the story? She's like, this is never coming back again. I'm like, it's never coming up again. And I really feel like in this state where he's figuring stuff out, like, I wonder if he just kind of leaned on stuff that he already liked, If he just leaned on murder mysteries, or just mysteries in general, and horror movies, and the way that those are structured. There's so many stands. Oh my god, like, I feel like half the stands in part 3 are based on horror movie monsters in some way. Like, Dark Blue Moon, the creature from the Black Lagoon. There has to be a ghost ship somewhere, right? Ebony Devil. Okay, here's the thing. I always assumed Ebony Devil was a Chucky reference, like the evil possessed doll. And Kat immediately picked it out as being a reference instead to, what is it? It's called Horror Trilogy? Or like, hang on. Evil African Doll. Black Devil Doll? That is very similar to Ebony Devil. The fuck is this? Black Devil Doll from Hell, 1984. No. Evil. It's some like really like horror trilogy anthology or something like that. Evil African Doll movie. Trilogy of Terror. Yeah. Look up Trilogy of Terror, like doll. And you're like, oh, that is just Yellow Temperance. Sorry, not Yellow. Ebony Devil. It's just like a little African guy with a spear, a wooden doll. That was crazy. Like, she totally picked that out. Yellow Temperance is like the Blob. Is there a horror movie villain who like lives in mirrors? Because I loved Hangman. I think Hangman is such a cool idea. Wheel of Fortune is Christine? That's the car, right? Yeah, I always get Christine and Carrie mixed up just because of the C. Justice feels like such a horror movie plot of like the ghost town with the haunted hotel and everything. Death 13 that's just Freddy Krueger, right? Hang on. Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Okay, so that would have been No, that would have been way before. The JoJo started 87. That would have definitely been before. Yeah, part 3. So yeah, very obvious a Nightmare on Elm Street reference. Did I have other thoughts on it? A lot of the arcs in part 3 are they could be a little bit hit or miss, you know. It's very you got to watch it a little bit differently. I think the first 2 parts are very like we're going on an adventure, it's just kind of driving forward and forward. Part 3, he's taken his time a little bit. That might be a fault of the anime for the way that it adapts the manga, because it is forced to be a little long-winded, right? The pacing is a little drawn out. Things that could have been 1 episode get split into 2. Wheel of Fortune was a lot more fun than I remembered. It's a really dumb stand, but it's just supercar with spikes and shit. When's JoJo Kart coming out? But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I think that I remember almost dropping the series after Dark Blue Moon, and then not doing it. And I'm grateful that I did. I'm grateful that I didn't drop it. But I do remember that really coloring my perception of the first season of part 3. I think on a rewatch, I can be a little kinder to it. It's a little goofier. It's more fun. I mean, Christ, that Wheel of Fortune fight literally has like a like Jotaro, like fucking Jotaro has like his fake out death where they think he's died. And then the Wheel of Fortune guy goes, "I win! Part 3 is over!" And Jotaro like explodes out of the ground and he's like, "Actually, no, it's not. I'm the main character." That's basically the dialogue. They just break the fourth wall like that. It's the only time in the whole series. It's so weird. It's really weird. Like, you can feel Araki like, like he's fucking around a little too much. Yeah, I'm surprised that she wasn't as hot on High Priestess. I really like that fight. I think it's cool. I like the moments of like Jotaro calling Suzy Q. I think the stand I like that it's that fight is largely confined to like the submarine. They're in the yellow submarine. Yeah, she wasn't super into it, but I like it a lot. I think it's a cool stand as well. Judgment. Okay, when I talk about weird reaction that she has. So personally, I have very few things in JoJo that I would point to and say, I think that was the wrong decision. I wish that he hadn't done that. I wish he would have done it differently. There's not that many. I think that for the most part, the series really works when you kind of just trust Araki and just sort of let him take the wheel, you know? That's why I think, you know, when I reread part 8, I think it's much better on a reread where, you know, you don't have all this time month to month to month to think about the story. Because, like, you can just kind of, like, go through it. And you don't build up, like, certain expectations or anything. Like, I think the story is a lot better when you just go through it in, like, big chunks. And genuinely, when you can just, like, binge a part, I think it's actually better than... I think the ride works better. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah, right. Generally, I kind of trust Araki to ride, at least competently. But bringing Avdol back is one of the few things that I genuinely don't like. When he dies, quote unquote, during the Hanged Man and Emperor fight, that was one of the most memorable moments of part 3 for me. That was like a big deal. I love the way that that episode is framed. Because you get into this rhythm, right? Like that's 10 episodes in. You've been in the rhythm of go here, fight a guy, go here, fight a guy, go here, fight a guy for 9 episodes before this. of pretty formulaic storytelling with these 5 characters, and it's very, it's formulaic. And then suddenly, this dude shows up, and it seems like it's just going to be like any other fight, except, oh, there's 2 of them. That's the twist. And then Avdol, who's been like a sort of mentor, older figure, kind of like, just like an older, more experienced stand user, really powerful guy, just gets shot in the fucking head and dies. And that's how the episode ends. And it's like, oh, fuck. Like, he's willing to just go there. Rocky's willing to just kill off a main character of the story like that. And that is so memorable to me. And everything that happens afterwards and the way that all unfolds. The fact that Jay Guile is the guy who killed Polnareff's sister. Them getting like revenge on him, and like, oh my, I was really invested. I was like, holy shit, no, like this is really cool. I was not expecting this to go here. And it also made a lot of sense to me why Avdol was not the most developed character, because he's gonna die really fast. And then he gets resurrected, and I'm like, oh, that kind of makes it feel like a little cheap, to the point where I and many other people assumed that it was sort of an improvised decision to bring him back, like that wasn't part of the original plan. No, that's wrong. Araki always planned on bringing Avdol back. I think it was just a bad idea. I think it kind of detracts from that character motivation that Polnareff had. And particularly, I really dislike the fact that the other Crusaders knew about it and didn't tell him. That feels like they say like, oh, you would have said something because you got such a big mouth, Polnareff. But like, that feels really mean. That feels like uncharacteristically mean. Kat thought it was funny, so I guess it worked on her. But for me, that just felt like really out of character for them, and just mean. Like, what the fuck, guys? That's like not really. That's a really uncool. Like, Polnareff thought that he got him killed. And it was specifically because that whole situation of Polnareff storming into that fight because he was trying to find his sister's murderer, and then Avdol coming in to assist him and then dying for it. And Polnareff feels like, oh my god, my strong-headedness and my inability to control my emotions got my friend killed. Oh my god, like that incredible guilt that must be weighing over him, which you see in the Judgment arc. Judgment and Justice, always get those mixed up. In the Judgment arc, in that arc. And the fact that he was alive the whole time, and it's like, dude, what the fuck? And it's played as a joke, and it's like, no, I'm not really cool with that. I would be kind of fucking pissed off. Like, why couldn't they just tell him that he's recovering in the hospital? And like, what? Like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. It just feels unnecessarily cruel. And the fact that they all just kind of laugh about it, and Polnareff is just standing there like, what the fuck? Is really weird. And I don't like it. I think it detracts from the emotion of the original death. And the way that it's handled by the other Crusaders in order to explain it feels, one, really half-assed, and two, just like out of character and really unlikable. I think they're really unlikable in a way that never really shows up again in the series. Like, Stardust Crusaders is a very gang-focused part. not like in the part 5 way, like a literal, mob, not like a mafia, but like, like a group dynamic focused part where it's called Stardust Crusaders. They are the Stardust Crusaders. So to just have that kind of interaction between them that feels so, just hostile is bizarre. It's really weird. Almost like bullying. I don't know. I really dislike it. And here's the difference. Here is the difference between Kat and I. When Avdol finally shows back up, I remember when I saw that, I was like, what? What is going on here? When Kat saw that, you know what she said? She goes, he's black from the dead. I was like, that's it? That's all you have to say? And she's like, yep. I'm like, all right. So that's the first half of part 3. That's Journey to Egypt. I'm really looking forward to the second season, because that is kind of infamously where Rocky starts to really figure it out. He starts to get it together. I'm looking forward to those. What's the first? Isn't that like a weird first? What's the first? Is it Geb? I think. Yeah, obviously the Osiris fight. I have to remember, I don't remember all of the... Oingo Boingo! Yeah, they got Oingo Boingo. There's some fun ones. There's actually, I'm looking at the episode list. I think all of these are actually really good. Even Alessi. Yeah, actually, second season's kind of like straight heat. I'm looking at the fight, like the episode list. I think it's all really good, actually. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that through with the rest of her. She said that she's going through this because she wants to get to parts. She wants to be caught up when we get to part 7, or when that like comes out. Which, like, technically, could you go through part 7 without having seen or read anything previous? Yes, technically, but like you really shouldn't. You really shouldn't. Yeah, I would not like, it's technically possible. And, you know, it's one sort of neat aspect of the series that you can kind of just watch any part at any point besides like part 6, which is like very dependent on previous parts. You can basically get through each part without having seen any of the other ones. It's like a neat little detail about it, but I would not recommend it. You know, the story is JoJo forms. People tend to think of JoJo as being multiple individual arcs, and it certainly is, but over time I've come to also see it as one gigantic arc that consists of like smaller pieces and chunks that thematically tie together, but the whole thing ties together at a certain level and has surprisingly deep themes, which I would love to talk about as we go through the show.